Hello people. This is Varun R Thakur here, and you can call me VRT. In one of our first shows here, we bring to you fascinating stories and diverse perspectives from in and around Europe. I'm here in beautiful Luxembourg, in the heart of Europe. I arrived here in 2015 as a professional, and after years of exploring this beautiful continent and coming across people from all walks of life, I'm today a proud EU citizen. Through our insightful conversations with guests on this show, I will take you on a journey through the minds, hearts, and souls of diverse people across Europe. Through our guests, we will get an inside view of what the people of Europe believe, think, say, and feel about work, life, and our place in the world. My guest today is a mystic and an alchemist. I first met him in 2016, and in the first 30 minutes of our meeting, I was amazed by the depth of his spiritual knowledge, his insights about consciousness, the mind, esoteric arts and sciences, and his perspective on the world and on life. Today, we will dive into a mystic's mind and see the world from his perspective. All I can promise to you is that this is not going to be an ordinary conversation. Hi everybody. So here is Einar Artyn. He's my friend who I met in 2015, 2016, back in the day when I just moved to Luxembourg. And in his own words, he describes himself as a mystic, an alchemist. I like to call him as a spiritual friend, as someone who has very deep insights about life, about mind, about consciousness. And I'd like to just give it over to him. So Einar, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing good, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure. And you know, it's over the years we've had so many conversations, and they've been so freewheeling and so insightful just for me as an individual that I just had to have you here as one of our first guests on the show, and just to pick your mind, just to pick your brain, just to grill you on some of those topics that we've spoken about over the years. And it's going to be a interesting conversation. So Einar, tell us a little bit about, you're a Luxembourg citizen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us a little bit about how you grew up here and a little bit about your life.
Well, I was born here, and my mother is Persian, my dad Icelandic. So I grew up in a multicultural household.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was Muslim, but not religious in the strict sense, but she believes in a higher power. My dad was pretty much atheist, but I nonetheless had a connection to God, and I went to religion class in Luxembourgish school, so I grew up with a lot of Christianity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I got pretty much a taste of Luxembourgish upbringing in school, and then a totally different upbringing at home. Yeah.
Ah, that's interesting. I didn't know about the fact that you came from a multi-religious background as well, right? So how was it growing up in a house where you had maybe different, faiths, so to speak? Did that have an impact on your upbringing?
Yeah, I would say that my mom, at least she was open to a higher power always. That was an open door, but she was an interesting person to grow up with, because she was not in agreement with the way Islam is practiced, especially the whole fanatic side of the equation. So she was actually kind of distanced from the institutionalized way of thought, but she just believed that there's some truth in religion. Just it might not be the whole fanaticism that's associated with it. And for my part, she was really open. She was like, you guys choose what you believe in, whatever you choose, make up your own choice, and we don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah, that was quite open from her.
And what about this different perspective that you had from your dad's side? You said he was an atheist.
Yeah, he was more of an atheist. I think he believed in some paranormal stuff, but you couldn't really say that he was much of a spiritual or a religious person.
Okay.
He had some interesting myths from Iceland about the elves, since they claim that they have elves living there. And that was about it. But as a child, of course, those stories just stick with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Have you been to Iceland?
Yeah, twice, but really late. I saw Iceland after my dad passed,
Okay.
like when I was 18 the first time, or 19.
Uh-huh. So, I remember during the course of our discussions, you've said that, and you just mentioned now also when your dad passed away, that was a big turning point in your life. There was a very pivotal moment in
Yeah.
how you became as an individual, how you found your own individuality. So if you would just run us through what you went through during that phase and, how you became the person you are.
I would say before I go into my father entirely, I would say that an important thing to know is that I always struggled with education in the education system. Nonetheless, I tried to make school work. And up to the point where my dad passed, I made a lot of effort to just make things work out, at least manage the minimum. And he was kind of like the catalyst, which really made me realize, but I don't care about the education system. In many ways, they're not educating us. They're teaching us what to think, not how to think. And once he passed away, I was in such a depression, in such a grief, that I didn't feel the motivation any longer to show up at class, to bother about homework, to bother about school. So I just kind of allowed myself to free ride it. I was anyway 18, I'm self-responsible. So I kind of took self-authority by feeling so crap that I didn't mind if I skipped class.
Okay.
And I would just skip class, I would come to the city, but I would go and read a book in a cafe. That would be my school day. And maybe I would show up for 2 hours in class.
Okay. Okay. So it's like what Mark Twain said, right? Don't let schooling interfere with your education.
Yeah.
So you were one of the poster childs of that, that quote itself.
And I would even say Mark Twain was someone I discovered, especially a lot of those quotes around that time. And it helped tremendously to realize there are individuals out there in the world who have tasted individuality in the true sense of the word. And they actually tell you that it's not very much liked. You have to dare to stand out of the crowd to really be true to yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, just taking a step back, you said that you were always, you were not the kind of person who agreed with everything the education system had to say, and you had your own opinion and views about it, which is why you would be in the city and you would be reading your own kind of books.
Yeah.
How do you think that happened to you? Like, what was the catalyst for that to happen?
I read so much, and I have my parents and my grandparents, I guess, to thank for that. I used to only read fiction and fantasy. So since primary school, I read. And at some point, I realized I'm reading like 10, 20, 30 books a month. And in school, we have like these 4 school books or 5 school books, which we go through in a year. And I just, at some point, just felt ridiculous. It was like, but I'm able to go through so many books on my own, in my own time. And we're struggling through an entire year to get through this one class book. And that was just, at that point, I always felt the urge, like, my mom was like, you have to get educated. But I knew inside myself, I love the world. I love everything about it. I love to learn. I love books. I am educating myself. Can you not see that? Is that not enough? So I'm even so educated that I look at the school material and I tell myself, well, this is outdated stuff. How come I have to waste my time with outdated stuff when I have access to what is now just recently come out?
Right.
Why are we going through all this hassle? This is not school. And why fill my mind up with nonsense when I have the better version in front of me? Yeah.
So typically, when you have that kind of an approach to a societal way of thinking, that somehow gets some kind of friction within your parents, right? Like, for example, there's an opposition because you're going against the wind.
Yeah.
So how did your family take this approach of yours?
Since my dad was not there to judge, I felt that was a liberating fact. I had one less authority figure to be standing there alive judging me.
Yeah.
My mother was a different story. She, up to this day, I feel, struggles with the fact that I go against the stream. And I'm now 33, and even in my 30s, she comes up to me and tells me, "Hey, would you not like to go to a uni and get a degree, etc.?" I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I'm not going to do that." And then I didn't take school as seriously anymore. And I got a lot of friction also from teachers. I wrote my last protest letter to the school system after my father's passing, just because of the way they didn't know how to deal with someone who's grieving or who's depressed. It just felt ridiculous that you have to keep on with the same rhythm, even though you've just suffered a loss like that.
Yeah.
And that just made me really angry. And it was like, you know what, I don't care about this whole school. And I'd rather get my whole insights into this situation out. Maybe someone hears it and it allows them to question a little bit. Yeah.
So Einar, what was the kind of feedback that you were getting from your professors at school? Like you were writing these protest letters. How were they taking it?
Those that really didn't do the job because of teaching, they took it the most personally. Some teachers were supportive of it, but also in a sense, they were more supportive of me than the letter, I would say. They tried to make me fit in, I would say, give me like more nuanced ways to fit myself into the basic structure.
Yeah.
And that felt kind of, in hindsight, I would say I felt it was kind of backstabbing, since it's like, hey, we agree that you think differently, but you know what? This is just the way the world works. And how about you just fit in? We can find something more exotic for you, but how about you just fit in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the language of society, is it right to label you as a rebel?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
And how do you feel about that? When you're going against the when you're going against the grain?
I would say I've toned down the rebelliousness towards externals over the years, and it's become more something that has even fueled more the inspiration to delve deeper into the meaning of life. Since it just felt like everyone is trying to trick you, not to make up your own mind.
Yeah.
And just that sensation was like, I'm not going to buy anyone's conclusion. I want to make my own.
Yeah.
And if everyone is so determined on making me just make a choice, something that has already been chosen before, that doesn't feel like actually seeking the actual meaning for myself.
Yeah, like, in a lot of our conversations, you have spoken about reaching and arriving at your own conclusions.
Yeah.
And I want to get to this topic during the course of our conversation today. But just taking a step back to the pivotal instance of when you lost your dad, right? So you said you got into reading a lot of things, and I remember you speaking about coming across certain scriptures and certain books, and it took you down the path of finding yourself, discovering yourself, a very spiritual path. So just walk us through that whole journey, right from the initial days to where you came later on.
I would say the subcurrent of spirituality was always there. I felt God more as my real parents than I did my parents on some level. But when my dad passed, that was like the pivotal moment where I really felt like I wanted to understand what this life is about. Why are we here? Is what we're chasing after, and the things that we wish we had or hope to experience, are they really worth having? Or are they just delusional dreams? Is there something worth having? Is there something that is actually worthwhile cultivating here and now, that actually is meaningful in realizing that there's an end coming? Let's put it that way.
Okay.
What would survive the end?
Okay.
Is there anything that would survive it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was where this started, right? And take us down the rabbit hole as you went through it.
Well, I would say the rabbit holes really started then I would say about the same time that my dad was just passed, where I was in my final year with a new classmate that I just met. And I was sitting beside him always, and he would read books. And it was one of the few people that I met that I saw had actually a hunger for books, it seemed. And one day he's reading this book, and I see it has all kinds of weird symbols on it. And I'm like, what's this book? And he tells me it's The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And I ask him what's it about. Is it all I knew about spirituality, I would say, is religion. And for the rest, paranormal stories and fantasy books. And then he explains to me that's literally a book about magic, about spirituality, but based on actual history and based on actual practices in the world. And that was a rabbit hole. I immediately grabbed that book for myself. And then I stumbled upon Robert Anton Wilson. Maybe you've heard of him.
No.
He's famous for his, I would say, bringing alive the whole current of chaos magic. Okay. Which was more of magic looked through the lens of just psychology. And it was a way to, it was I would say, a novel framework for magic to be done, and just being able to, even as an atheist, practice magic, just considering it perhaps that it's just playing with the psychology of the mind. So that brought magic back into the public spectrum in many ways in the West. And I found his ideas really profound. Okay. He mentioned, for example, just applying a framework to yourself and then living out your life according to that framework. Let's say you're an atheist, then you should try to live as a Christian for a week. Interesting. But you should really apply that for that 1 week. You give yourself fully to the faith. You just tell yourself, I believe all of these principles, all of this framework, how it's built up, and I live my life according to this framework for a week. And then he tells you, after you've done that for a week, then radically shift. Now practice 1 week Islam. And then practice 1 week maybe Hindu system. Maybe practice 1 week then Buddhism. And for him it was like, okay, now that you've done that, you will realize that synchronicities start happening. You take the Christian view and you start having like meaningful coincidences happen which reflect the Christian cosmology. So you almost start embodying everything that Christianity stands for after going through that week? Is that what you're saying? Even while you're in that week, exactly. You will start seeing manifestations of archetypes, cosmological ideas that pertain to Christianity, or even proofs in terms of like weird happenings that happen to you that you could interpret as evidence that, oh my God, Christianity must be real. And you could do that, then you should do that not just with one, but you should do with several. Just to see that no matter which new viewpoint you take, your reality seems to adjust itself. Interesting. To the framework that you're living through. Wow. So how does this apply, or, you know, how can a common man make sense of all of this? Like, what's the conclusion? To me, it almost feels like these are belief systems. Right? And when you look at the world through a certain lens, the world starts reflecting back what you're seeing through. It's like you wear rose-tinted glasses, you see a rose-tinted world, right? So, like, how do we as individuals apply this in our day-to-day lives?
to improve our lives or just to get a better sense of understanding of the world?
I would say maybe it's not precisely something that I can say brings a specific about, but just considering the implications of it opens a whole world of questions one can start wielding in terms of the beliefs that one does hold.
Yeah.
Realizing, okay, but why am I holding this assumption, this belief? Is it just based upon a singular occurrence? Are there paradoxes in my experience that actually contradict this assumption?
Yeah.
And if so, is there any way that I can now reformat the belief or assumption that I have to make space so that it can hold both sides?
Yeah.
The contradiction and the truth of whatever I've experienced in that one occurrence.
Yeah.
And I feel it's kind of more of a constant refinement of the assumptions that we hold and use to relate with reality. But I don't see a final destination with that. I cannot say it's going to bring you something. It's most likely going to shift your way of relating to things. But how it will look for every individual is going to be unique.
Interesting. I'd like to draw attention to the fact that, and this is something that Einar has always mentioned, and we've discussed a lot about this, is question your assumptions.
Yeah.
Do not always take things at face value. Just come to your own conclusions, as you said. So it just circles back to that point.
Yeah.
Nice. Einar, so I remember you speaking around this time. You also had an introduction, so to speak, into psychedelics, or you just, you happened to read and learn about them.
Yeah.
So tell us about that journey and how that has had an impact on your life.
I would say, well, the first psychedelic I experienced, I would say was cannabis. And that one was a really weird one, because once I came...
And also tell us why how did you come to experience cannabis? Like, what led you to it? How did this happen?
Well, that one is the weirdest one, because that one, around the age of 12, that's the beginning of the internet. Like, that's when we had a computer at home and we had 50, the old modem, dial-up modem internet.
Yeah.
And I remember, since school had free internet, that's when we started having more access to researching stuff.
Okay.
And for some odd reason, I was really fascinated by cannabis from the age of 12. And I kept looking stuff up. I kept going on the internet and looking at, is it really bad? And at that time, it was still very restrictive. And all you would find is occasionally maybe like one site that linked it a little bit to shamanism. And then you found a few sites that mentioned the possibility that it might heal cancer. So it was like, that was the biggest lens, which was like, okay, maybe it's not that bad. But for some reason, I kept just researching it for like 4 years, 5 years, until I had the opportunity to finally try it out. And it was just being drawn to it, even though it was not friends that made me look for it. It was just I cannot even explain myself. It was like something like weed, cannabis. So it seemed familiar to me, even though I have never heard about it. And just like reading up on it and getting this feeling, I feel I need to have this encounter. And then that was with 16. Then I had no other experiences other than that, which was already really mind-blowing, in the sense that my first encounter with it, I was literally able to see with my eyes open, just shift and see what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I also want to draw attention to the fact that we are not explicitly discussing psychedelics or any of these substances as a means of recreation or relaxation, but it's more from a spiritual perspective of being able to go inside yourself. So, I want you to delve a little deeper into what that experience for you has evolved over a period of time. Like, from the moment you read about it to the moment you tried it for the first few times, and how that experience for you was very different from what it is for a vast majority of people.
I would say since I had read up on it and I was open to the possibility that it could actually be consciousness expanding, I feel somewhere the innocence and naivety with which I went into the experience gave me a gift which maybe a lot of people miss out on, because they have their friends tell them what it is, what it's like, what you do while you are on it. They basically are giving you the frameworks with which you're going to go into the experience.
Right.
Like I would say if my friends had been the ones informing me, okay, now you're going to smoke weed, you're going to have munchies, you're going to laugh about stupid stuff, we're going to watch something really stupid on the TV. It's like, you're already set up for a stupid experience.
Yeah, that's true.
And I feel for me, somewhere there was this possibility when I encountered it that I felt this is not just recreational.
Right.
And something about that, it was like, I don't, maybe the plant herself appreciated just meeting her in the unknown.
Yeah.
That she gifted me that beautiful experience.
So who is the she?
I would say the plant herself.
So you describe cannabis as a feminine plant.
Yeah.
Why do you do that? Like,
it just seems obvious, but on one level, it is the female plant that we smoke. It's always from the female that the flowers are taken. And it feels like the archetype of the plant itself is very feminine.
Okay.
I feel what she taught me was to come into touch with my feelings over time. Yeah.
Okay. You spoke about cannabis, right? And there are also a bunch of other experiences that you've had with a bunch of other plants.
Yeah.
And, you know, so just take us through that journey, linking back to what you were going through during this period, which you said was a pivotal turning point in your life around your father's passing away. And some of the, you know, insights that you that you had at this time.
When my first experience after cannabis was L.S.D, that was right around the time my father passed. And that was mind-blowing on a whole different level, since it just felt like it shifted the whole perception of time and space. It was maybe 12 hours long, but it felt like days on end. And we did it in the forest, and on one place we come out into an opening, and I just see literally all the trees before me, like the whole horizon is filled with the tops of the trees. And I could literally see them breathe. I could see a really weird, colorful air go into the trees and then come out a whole different color. And it was like you're seeing all the trees breathe. And that moved me a lot. That was like an experience of really seeing, wow, this is all alive. It's not just what we see with our eyes like this. It looks almost static, not living. And there it just was like, wow, okay, no, this is all alive.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a big one. And then I didn't have much experiences until I finally tried out mushrooms. And there I had a few deep experiences, which actually started my whole process of writing. Yeah. The first few trips I had were just, I would say, very joyful. I cannot say I had a lot of insights. They were very pleasant. They were very childlike. I always did it in the forest with a good friend. And it just felt like going back into your childhood and seeing things through the eyes of innocence.
Okay.
It was more enlivening, but I don't feel like I got much deep insights from any of those initial trips. And I would say by that time, I had even gotten up the expectation that this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
And at the moment that expectation was building up, the next trip that I had was already much more challenging. this, one could say, challenging. Basically, at the end of the trip, everything is finished, and we went to a cafe, and we just ordered a cappuccino, and we're basically coming back to normal. Everything is looking normal, and I'm sitting there, and suddenly I notice something is really odd. And the odd thing was, I just had no thoughts. My mind was absolutely silent, and everything just looked like it made sense. Like, I looked around, and there were like just a cafe. It's like you have paintings on the wall, a few chairs, and something about the whole scene, no matter what I looked at, it just made sense. It just seemed like so obvious. And my mind was blank. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Something is so different. I'm experiencing something that I've never experienced before, but I cannot even put my finger on it.
Right.
And slowly, as that feeling creeps up, I started having my first few questions. And then it was as if my mind was speaking to me, but in second person. It was like, you cannot stay like this. And I'm like, what do you mean I cannot stay like this? Yeah. What's going on? And it's like, no, people are going to notice.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. And it kept talking to me as if I'm a separate individual. Like, it's not, I cannot stay like this. People are going to know. But it's like, hey, you cannot stay like this.
Yeah.
And I would say that was my first encounter of what I felt was archetypally the mind of God and the devil.
Yeah.
In the sense of that was the structure in myself which narrated me a safe story, in a sense.
Interesting.
It's like the one that protected me from the world.
Okay.
But not in a good way, since the world had become something. I was bullied a lot in school when I was young, for example, and I just stood out, and I never understood why, since I was just doing my thing. But people I don't know, they would just come up to me and bully me.
Okay.
And I feel that voice developed there. It's like, maybe some people say it's the ego. Maybe it's the ego. And it was like the face to face with that part in me that it couldn't tell me why it's protecting me.
Yeah.
And it couldn't tell me why I could not stay in that mindless state. But it was threatened. It felt like, hey, you... And that was a really deep experience, because for me it was like, that's when I started writing. I was like, what is this? The only thing I know about this is maybe terms like enlightenment or mindlessness.
Yeah.
And I looked up all the different cultures that speak about similar experiences. And that's how I got into the whole vocabulary of, maybe it was my ego. Was that my ego? Was that the experience of being in no mind, and then you have the egoic voice come back, and you had the opportunity to witness that it's possible to be in that state.
Right.
And you're functioning.
Yeah.
And that brought up all my questions, literally. Yeah.
Interesting. You brought out a lot of different themes and topics now. You've spoken about God, and the opposite of God. You spoke about the ego and consciousness and so on. And you also spoke about writing. So I remember this is a book that Einar has written, and I had it about 5 to 6 years back. So these are a lot of the writings that he's written over the last, I would say, 7 to 8 years. And Einar, I've told you this, that when I was going through the contents of this book, I've not read all of it, most of it I've read, but there is a dark undertone, right? So just walk us through, where that came from and why.
I would say this was so dark since it was reflective of what I was traveling through. I was struggling with having to fit in. I was struggling with my father just having passed away. I was struggling to find meaning in death, to find meaning in life. I felt kind of still oppressed. I did not know how to fully yet own myself, be my own authority. So I've always lived it out, but inwardly I still struggled a lot living that out, and I had not yet soothed all of those struggles.
Okay.
I still had so many doubts. And these were basically the beginnings, the first flickers of light, which just creatively came to be.
Okay.
And I didn't even know what I'm writing, like many of it's poems. So I would just sit and I would just write. And I must say, I read them today, and today I understand a lot more about what is written there than when I wrote it myself. So it's, for me, it's always felt like I didn't write this.
So who wrote it?
My higher self, higher intelligence.
Okay. So
that was like helping me read the words I needed to hear.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us what you mean by higher intelligence and God. What does God mean to you?
I would say on the most absolute level, God for me is just a divine intelligence that is and contains everything. Yeah. It's everywhere. And it's, for me, just it's divinely intelligent. It is conscious. And from that absolute level, then there's also the whole spectrum of creation. And just as there are smarter people out in the world you can meet, there are also higher intelligences than what we as humans are averagely accustomed to. And I would say on some level, those things seem to be able to write through us, talk through us. Here I would say higher intelligence is on one level maybe that what I call God. On another level, sometimes the earth I felt was talking. Sometimes I felt it was elementals talking.
When you say elements are talking, what do you mean?
The beingnesses of fire and water and earth and air. Spirits of nature. Yeah. Kind of like in Hindu, the fire is Agni, and Agni is also a beingness unto himself. He's the very grandfather fire himself. He's every fire. He is the fire.
So it's a characteristic.
Yeah, it's a true living. It's a true living being. It's not just fire that is blindly burning and it's just matter or a substance of matter, but it's Agni.
So you've, over the years, I know you've read across different topics. I know you've read a little bit of Hindu mythology, you've read about Christianity, you've read about a bunch of different topics, right? So what are some of the things that you've picked up from some of these scriptures over the years? And how have they influenced you as a person?
I would say the most valuable thing was being able to eventually recognize that that no matter what spiritual system in the world, the fundamental truths seem to be universal across all of them.
Which is?
The importance of being in coherency, integrity, and having true values. But I would say that many of these systems have gotten stagnant in my eyes, in that they have crystallized into this own thing. And a lot of people follow it, just following the paths that have been walked through that system, instead of really making use of the tools in a really raw way to delve into the more fundamental truths it has to offer, which is beyond text, beyond script, beyond any absolutes. It's make use of the tools to draw your own conclusions. The framework is just there to help you ground and make sense of things that perhaps don't always make sense to the physical mind.
Why do you stress on the fact that we as individuals should come to our own conclusions about many things in life? Like, why is that something of importance?
I can put it this way. In the beginning of my search, I realized what I'm initially first looking for was to confirm my own reality.
Mm-hmm.
Do I actually even exist?
Mm-hmm.
So is existence real?
Mm.
Is there something that can prove to me the evidence of something about this
Mm-hmm.
being just more real than just a short illusion that
Mm-hmm.
pops up and this is gone?
Yeah.
But then I realized, but that's stupid. So how can I find something outside of myself
Mm-hmm.
which proves that what I am
Mm-hmm.
is real?
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, okay, but I cannot find anything outside of myself that will stand as the proof. All I can do is live the understanding that if anything makes sense, then something about me must be real.
Interesting.
And from that point, all I have is what I'm experiencing to make sense out of. And from there, it's like my experience is all I have to draw the necessary conclusions
Mm-hmm.
in the end about what is fundamentally real,
Mm-hmm.
what is fundamentally truthful
For you.
for me.
Uh-huh.
Since I must live with the idea that I am reality.
Uh-huh.
I am real.
Mm-hmm.
I am the very ground of my own reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I hold my inside and my outside.
Mm-hmm. You know, it brings to light one of the age-old questions which I'm quite fascinated by, and love to get your thoughts on this, is it all destined? Is it all written? And if so, who's writing it? Or if not, do we have free will? Is there an element of choice in our decision making? And I remember we had this conversation some time back, but what's your take on this?
I would say it's a paradox, first of all, that it's all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all of those things depending on the individual.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of destiny, I would say the more fixed you are in your ways, the more you will appear to have a fixed destiny,
Mm-hmm.
and you will live a predictable life. And your life will even be highly predictable using methodologies like divination, astrology, tarot, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You can read someone's future and realize that these settings with which he's living his life right now, from the looks of it, he doesn't seem like he's ever going to drop them.
Mm-hmm.
And they will be around in some way, shape, or form in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if I just keep reading this potentiality, I can pretty much predict where he's going to be at.
Mm.
But if that individual is someone who's questioning his life, questioning the values according to which he directs himself, is stepping into his own authority,
Mm-hmm.
making his own conclusions about what life is, how he operates, how he relates, that individual, you can read what is now present for him, but you will not be able to read his future.
Mm.
You would have to make a reading every moment of creation up to that instance.
Yeah. So you just spoke about astrology and tarot, right? I'll tell you my personal perspective. I'm not fully convinced about astrology. I've got my readings done from people, and I know I have a very high level understanding of how astrology works. There's a Western astrology, there's an Indian Eastern astrology, there's a Chinese astrology. There are many different pathways to the same topic of astrology. But what are your thoughts on it? Do you think that this is very deterministic? This is very factual, or is there an element of how you interpret it? Does this is this can someone get their astrological chart read, and how accurate do these things are these things actually?
I'll put it this way: you're predicting the weather. Okay, so where we're at, we can look at the sky and we can calculate where certain planets will be at a given moment, even 100 years in the future. If we assume that those planets, well, in those certain constellations, they're having a very unique effect. Just like a certain stream of water is now activated and flowing in one direction. in a different position, a different flow, a different stream is activated. Just as we say during full moon, people get lunatic. And if we can correspond that to every planet, then we can say, okay, on the most realistic level, what astrology is doing is looking at what are going to be the weather patterns, not just the weather in terms of the Earth, but the weather in terms of how the Earth is interacting with the greater solar system.
Okay.
What are the influences going to be like? But that's all I can really say. It's like I can say that in 50 years from now, we're going to have Saturn conjunct to the Sun. That's true. That I can predict. And I can tell you, well, according to that, you will have influences of perhaps topics of the Sun is the ego, is the self. Saturn is constriction. They're conjunct. So constrictions of self. So those themes might actually be very prevalent in the world. If you have in your own birth charts a correspondence to that pattern, let's say you were born with a Saturn conjunct the Sun, the likelihood that you will be even more affected by this repeating pattern is even greater. It's just because you're resonating a lot more with already this blueprint. If, let's say, it is constriction of self, you were born with that in your birth charts, well, maybe your whole life is built around getting over the lessons that try to constrict the self.
Yeah. So do you believe in astrology? Is that something that you have checked for yourself and you agree with it? Have you seen it manifest in your own life?
I would say the most palpable one I tasted would have been my Saturn return, which is it takes 27 years for Saturn to do one cycle. And so from the moment you're born to have Saturn return to the same place it was when you were born, you're usually at the age of 26, 27, 28. And that's usually a moment of big upheaval. It's the phase of, according to astrology, is when you actually get adult.
Okay.
They consider that the maturation phase.
Okay.
And I must say that one I felt quite palpably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, tell us a little bit about your experience with tarot. I know that you yourself do tarot readings.
Yeah.
How does that work? Does that even work?
Yes, it works. It works on the principle that nothing is random. All of reality is responding to us. Everything is listening to us. And the moment when I shuffle my deck and I draw the cards and I put them on a table, it's functioning according to the assumption that somewhere life knows the question. Meaning the question, the intent is being set either by the individual who's having the cards read or just myself. I set the intention. I know what my question is. That's the framework I want an answer to. And then I shuffle, and whenever I feel ready, I draw my cards.
Okay.
And I assume that the cards are a direct response to the intent with which I drew them for myself.
At that moment?
At that moment, exactly.
Okay. So you use the word assumption.
Yeah.
Right? So is it fair to say that this is still working on a level of faith, a level of belief, on a level of, I assume that I'm going to take this as true? Because I can choose I can choose to deny it. I can choose to not accept it.
Yeah. I would say if you want it to work, if you want to extract the most meaning out of it, you first have to go into the assumption of this works. Once you've extracted whatever meaning you think it's trying to give you, it's also really healthy to go to the assumption that maybe it's meaningless.
Why do you say it's healthy?
Since maybe your interpretation, maybe the answer is correct, but maybe your interpretation is done from the wrong mindset. You're not seeing the solution it's offering. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe the reading itself is wrong. So it's not a matter of don't fix yourself on something that is uncertain. Just if there's something to extract, which maybe just by the way the archetypes display themselves, they might lead you down a train of thought which you hadn't thought to consider. Maybe you're struggling in your mind, but the cards are hinting at your emotions. And so you look a bit deeper and you're like, yeah, actually I'm struggling with this emotionally. I'm not struggling with this mentally. So what is the emotion that I'm struggling with? And in that way, I must say the cards have helped a lot.
Okay.
Whenever I felt really uncertain, I felt like blocked or stagnating, that's when I take my cards and I'm like, okay, let's see what they show me. And maybe the themes they show me are not exactly what I thought the problem was. They're hinting at, hey, look, it's more to do with your creativity, or it has more to do with your feeling state, more to do with a practical matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like the part where you said that the universe is not random. So at any given point, if I have a question and there is a non-random answer out there, which is maybe through tarot, which I'm getting in that moment.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I would even go so far to say that once you experience tarot and that framework, once I came into alchemy, I realized, but you can do this all the time. That's literally the act of prayer. If I pray and I believe truly that, and I'm not talking about I wish to get a beautiful car, like more like, God, I'm struggling with this concept.
Yeah.
Help me see the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
That kind of prayer.
Yeah.
If you can formulate it that way and you can just set it out, believe that it was heard, and be attentive to your everyday happenings.
Yeah.
Even there you can read.
Yeah.
It's like once you make that prayer and you set out that intent, if you're just willing to participate in the unfoldings of your day to day, messages will come through.
You touched upon the topic of prayer, right? How is prayer different from meditation? Is it the same as meditation? And second question is, do you pray or meditate and meditate?
I would say both ideally cooperate. If you pray but you don't meditate, you will not hear the answers.
If you pray but you don't meditate, you won't hear the answers. Interesting.
And if you meditate without praying, you will just daydream.
Oh, I love that.
You will not have intentionality.
So if you pray without meditating, you will not hear the answers. And if you meditate without praying, you're basically daydreaming. I love that. That's a very, that's the first time I've heard some correlation between the two, and it just makes sense the more you think about it. That's cool. That's cool. So do you, I'm guessing now you do both, basically.
Yeah, and I would even say meditation has become more of the understanding of to be present, to not just be in here, to remember to look outwardly and just realize all of this is a response.
Looking at the world as a mirror.
Yeah, as a mirror, and even not just as a mirror, but as the other that is responding. The intelligence of life responding to less subtle things, responding through people, responding through animals, responding through everything.
So Einar, we've spoken a lot about the mystical and the mystic side of you, and I'm sure there are a lot more things that we can talk about. Let's for a moment switch to the alchemist in you, the alchemy side of it, which is, I don't know much about it. I don't know, I just know basics about it, but you've mentioned that it's also fusing or connecting the physical and the ethereal, and so just run us through what alchemy is for you and how you have made use of it.
One of the names it is given is called the royal art.
To alchemy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say that today I can agree as to why that is such. It's even my own life, it feels like everything was leading up through all sorts of different pathways to alchemy. Since beside all of the spiritual stuff, I also taught myself how to do my own perfumes, essential oil distillations and stuff. And I taught myself how to silversmith. I got really into crystals. And all those stuff just seem really separate. It's like one is working with metal, the other is working with crystal, working with the essential oils of plants, working with tinctures. And at that time, it was just curiosity. I didn't see them as connected. And then I stumbled upon alchemy, and basically in alchemy, the metals are present. The essential oils of plants is the main operation in a laboratory setting, is to create your own tinctures by very selectively preparing certain plants.
Okay.
And one of the main operations is the art of essential oil distillation. So I already had learned that. I just didn't know what to make with it other than perfume. And alchemy is all that. The first stage is this plant alchemy, which is learning the art of distillation and fermentation.
Okay.
Second stage is the mineral kingdom, which is like salts, etc. And then is the metal kingdom.
Okay.
And I actually was playing around with all of these three.
Without knowing that all of this is alchemy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or at least it comes out of alchemy.
Okay.
The stuff I was doing was like offshoots of something much more ancient. And that opened up the door of actually practicing laboratory alchemy. So I worked a lot with the plants, and I worked a bit with the metals in alchemical experiments. And basically what most people think that the purpose is to turn lead into gold.
Yeah.
That's all they think about. But in actuality, what you're preparing is medicines which are not psychedelics, but they actually enable you, if you work in the plant kingdom, the tinctures you make from the plants, they're prepared in such a way that when you take a few drops, they actually are almost psychedelic. And these are, you can make it with mint, which is not a psychedelic plant, but the effects that you have, your whole reality shifts. But not like a psychedelic where you're tripping, but more like the very archetype of the thing seems talking to you throughout your whole day. And that was actually the initiatory process in alchemy, was you prepare these medicines and then you take them according to the different archetypes, which are the 7 planets. So you would prepare a tincture for Venus, a tincture for the sun, for Mercury, for Saturn, for Jupiter, etc.
Okay.
And on the given day of the planet, like Monday is day of the moon, you would take your lunar tincture.
Okay.
So you would take a plant which corresponds to the moon, and imbibe that, and then see what lessons you get throughout the day. And these lessons will give you an understanding about how the moon, which is correspondent to the mind, how its archetype operates in reality.
So how have you used alchemy?
Well, I used it by using those preparations, and it blew me away, since I literally have these tiny drops, which there's nothing illegal inside it. But it was like you're sitting in front of a true magical potion. Yeah. And I shared it with a lot of people, but I don't know if it was because I had learned to sit with myself and observe things more pronounced. Not everyone felt something specific. Meaning, I would take it and I would experience my whole day. I would see certain themes come up that really correspond to this archetype. I would pay attention to what people tell me, or what I just hear on the side. And things would always curiously be around this subject, or a lot of the themes would be around the subject of the tincture taken. And for me, it was mind-blowing. It was one of the weirdest experiences to go through. And that whole thing taught me that alchemy is actually teaching us how to interface with the divine intelligence that is present.
Interface with the divine intelligence. Almost like just slipping in there.
Yes, exactly. And not just with it on the largest scale, but also in the interrelation that we have with all of life that surrounds us, whether it be the plants, the animals, the trees, humans, things we don't see, the fire itself, the water we bathe in. Yeah.
So based on, a lot of what you spoke about, astrology, alchemy, and, psychedelics, I guess I'm just coming to a very philosophical question and want to hear your views on it. Why are we here? Like, what are we doing in the grand scheme of things?
I will give my fun version of it. My fun version is this. God wanted to create a world and experience himself in it. And the moment he got his wish fulfilled, he actually forgot about his dream.
Okay.
And so he started dreaming about all the stuff in the world. And he's like, man, what is my true purpose?
Yeah.
And he's just waking up to the fact that, man, I'm in my dream that I wished. So I wished the world to be so that I could be in a world where I can be myself and share myself with others.
Yeah. Okay. So it was even God almost forgetting his purpose of why he made all of this. And he's just because he just got so involved with everything that he was discovering through us.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the fun version.
That's the fun version.
Is there another version?
I would say the feeling that I don't feel creation has ended, meaning that it was created and it's now finished. I feel that we are on the very edge of creation and it's only getting ever more real. That we haven't even reached full reality. In the sense that most people are still sleeping. They're like sleepwalking through their life. And they have not really like woken up like, wow, I'm actually alive.
When you say people haven't really woken up, right? Do you see a shift happening in the world today where people are proverbially waking up? And what does that even mean?
I would say one cannot know what it's going to look like. Yeah. And hopefully, if it's really true that people are waking up and at least asking more profound questions, I would say, while it looks bad now, I think it will look good. Yeah.
So I have one final question, which again, it's very philosophical, and I've kind of debated this myself, whether this even means something, whether this question even makes sense to ask. But is there a meaning and purpose inherent to our lives, right? Is there a meaning and purpose to your life? Is there a meaning and purpose to anyone's life?
I would say we are literally each individual sources of meaning, and we are that which has the ability to give meaning. So we are made of the very essence of meaning itself, and by virtue of that we are able to give things meaning. But to really give them meaning is to give them meaning because you came to your own conclusion that it's meaningful.
This is now circling back to the point of why you think it's important for everyone to come to their own conclusion about things. So can you rephrase that? Because I think that was really beautiful.
The nuance was, though, that you have to, for it to be meaningful, you have to come to your own conclusion that it is truly meaningful. It's a bit like, if everyone says that's beautiful, and you just say, yeah, it's beautiful because everyone says it. Well, it's not meaningful what you're saying.
That's true.
But if you can look at it and for some reason, whatever you're seeing for yourself inspires that feeling in you, like, wow, that's beautiful. Well, that's full of meaning. So no one can
take it away from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That's a nice thought to leave this moment with, that you give it meaning. It's only your own conclusions that give anything meaning and purpose in general. Well, Einar, this is yet one of those conversations after so many that we've had in the past as well, which has again been insightful, amazing, to say the least. And I want to thank you for being a part of this. It's been an enlightening experience, as always for me.
Yeah, it was fun.
And I'm sure we're going to have plenty more of these. Hopefully the weather supports us again next time. But thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. So ladies and gentlemen, that's Einar Artyn for you. And yes, this is both of us signing off from Luxembourg on a spring afternoon.